The topic of immigration continues to be a hot one in Canada, and it's not surprising given the skyrocketing cost of living, the difficulty in finding housing, the crowding that Canadians are unaccustomed to that's starting to come to the fore. But what's interesting is not only has immigration been a hot topic, things that in the past would have never been discussed, such as putting a moratorium on immigration or even deportations, is being discussed. So I thought it'd be interesting on this week's episode of Don't Talk TV to take a look at, would it even be legal to start deporting people? Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So welcome to our new time, and not new time, our new day of the week, Thursday evening. I hope this is going to work better for viewers. It does work better for me and my volunteer PR guy Richard for reasons of personal lives, so hopefully it works out and we get some new viewers as well. We're still stalled out at about 8.8 thousand subscriptions, so please spread the word. Share, subscribe if you're new to the channel, or if you've been watching us and you like our content, please subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications, because there's a lot of education on this channel, I think, that is beneficial to people, and it's not being spread by the algorithm. There's some indications that maybe we're being shadow banned, but the only way to fight against that is through organic growth. So we do appreciate all those who have subscribed, and we encourage others to join us in a subscription. So we're here back talking about immigration again, and I know Mr. Bernier, the only leader of a federal political party who's even talking about this issue in any concrete, real way. I mean, the Conservative Party of Canada, the only things I've heard Pierre Poilievre talk about is, well, let's make it easier to immigrate to Canada. Certainly not anything about reducing immigration targets, let alone deporting anyone. But I think Mr. Bernier, I believe, was on Rebel News. Not a big fan of Rebel News, but he was on with them, and they even got onto talking about, is deportation an option? I'm not going to talk about whether deportation is desirable or whether it be a good thing or not. That's outside the scope of Don't Talk TV, and I'm not a politician, but I am a lawyer, so I think we can look at, could that even be done? Assuming there were a situation where that's what the electorate wanted, they elected the People's Party or what have you, and people wanted this to happen. Could it actually happen lawfully, or would the courts shut this down right away? So we need to look firstly at non-citizens, because I can say right at the outset, deportation of citizens, that's a non-starter. Section 6 of the Charter guarantees that anyone who's a citizen can freely enter or leave the country. However, we will talk about, is citizenship permanent? But first, the question of deportation. So as I said, cannot be done with citizens, but it can be done with anyone else. Interestingly, when I looked into this a little bit, it's actually easier than I thought for permanent residents to be deported. Under the laws as they currently stand, there's a number of conditions, and the main one being if you become inadmissible to Canada, you can be deported under our current laws, even if you're a permanent resident. Certainly if you're here on some sort of work visa or student visa. So let's take a quick look at the Government of Canada website at some of the ways that an individual can become inadmissible. As always, we'll put the link in the show description, but here is the Government of Canada website, ways that you could be found inadmissible into Canada. So we've got, of course, here security reasons, including espionage, subversion, violence or terrorism, human or international rights violations, including war crimes, crimes against humanity. This is one that I see in my line of work as a criminal defense lawyer, committing a crime, including driving while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Anything, well, it depends on your level of permanency, but the highest being permanent residence. Anything where you get 6 months jail or more, you're done. You're getting deported. Organized crime, medical reasons. This is an interesting one. So if you have medical issues that could endanger public health, endanger public safety, or cause excessive demand on health or social services, you could become inadmissible. So this is an interesting one. because, I mean, look at the demand that's being placed on the medical system right now. This is actually an area that, it's a bit open to interpretation. This is something that if there were a politician who was really motivated and that's what the people wanted, they could deport all kinds of people because our health services and social services are being overburdened. This is another interesting one. Financial reasons. If you're unable or unwilling to support yourself and your family members. So that's another really interesting one. Or having an inadmissible family member. I mean, if they actually did some proper background checks on people, and I say that with reference to what I've mentioned in the previous episode when I spoke to Mr. Bernie, I believe on the live stream, was the fact that over 90% of the non-citizens who applied to the Canadian Armed Forces, when they opened up to non-citizens, they failed their background checks. So clearly Immigration Canada is not doing much in the way of background checks. And there have been some scandals we've seen in the media lately suggesting that a lot of checks have not been being done. So with the precedent there, I mean, there's already a number of ways that people could become inadmissible. Certainly with that precedent set, other ways could be added if someone wanted to. So I think it's clear that if there were a desire for large-scale deportations, that could absolutely happen and be completely within the laws of Canada. Now, when it comes to citizens, as I mentioned, Section 6 guarantees you have to always be allowed in or out of the country, but is citizenship revocable? Well, it's not revocable if you've been born in Canada, but naturalized citizens can have their citizenship revoked in certain specific circumstances. So let's take a look at the Citizenship Act. So look at the Citizenship Act, Section 10 here. And it says it's subject to Section 10.1 sub 1, the minister may revoke a person's citizenship or renunciation of citizenship if the minister is satisfied on a balance of probabilities that the person has obtained, retained, renounced, or resumed his or her citizenship by false representation or fraud, or by knowingly concealing material circumstances. So if they misled the government when they were applying for citizenship. And then there's some steps laid out in subsection 3 as to what needs to, the process for making that happen. We won't get into all the details of the requisites laid out under section 10.1. I think the main point here is that there are provisions to allow for the revocation of citizenship. So given that there's already at least some precedent for misrepresentation, there could also be, the law could be changed down the road to have revocation for other reasons. So even citizenship, if you weren't born here, is not 100% guaranteed. If you are born here, then that's not an issue. You cannot get rid of people who are born here, no matter how much you don't like them, which is probably a good thing for a lot of us who might be called deplorables, that if we're born here, we're citizens, that end of. Now that brings me to the third point I want to look at. What other options are there? I mean, I think mass deportation would be unlikely to be very popular or feasible in Canada. Arguments over the ethics or morality of that is something I'm not going to touch on, but suffice to say, it's probably something that is still easier said than done. And it'd certainly be very difficult if people got really serious about it, to be sending police door to door. There's just a lot that's unsavory about that, of dragging people out and shipping them out. But there are things like what Sweden's doing, where they're paying people, they're essentially bribing people to return back to the countries they came from in a form of remigration policy, where they'll pay out like a flat fee for a relocation fee. So I think that there's nothing that would be unconstitutional about that in Canada. Arguably, it might be even very economical if there are great strains being placed on the system, such as there are now. Now, I think, as I mentioned, that could result in inadmissibility, but it could also be better to just say, look, we'll give you money if you return to your home country so that our systems aren't being overburdened anymore. I think that leads into the next point is I've had in mind that really if you just canceled any and all supports and subsidies for non-citizens, that would probably cause a lot of people to want to leave as well. As we know, I think it's pretty well established, although we haven't covered the proofs of this on this channel. We can if people want to see that. But being an immigrant in 2024 is a lot different than when, say, family members of mine immigrated in the middle of the 20th century. Because back then, the government didn't give them a dime. They worked two jobs, had to learn English right away so that they could, build themselves up, and then they were able to build good livings for themselves. So if there were no supports for immigrants, how many people would even want to come to Canada in the first place? They would probably want to get out as soon as they could. But again, I think the key part is that being unable to support themselves or placing burden on the system would make people inadmissible. That doesn't seem to be enforced currently. Maybe it is. I'm always open to correction if I'm wrong. Maybe the media has been blowing things out of proportion. If you have input on that, we're happy to hear from it in the comments box. But all that said, I think it does go to show that that there are ways that could be done if that's what people wanted. Again, without making any commentary on whether that would be a good idea or not. This video, it's not a political position. It's also not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you need to get specific advice to the particulars of your situation. So you should call a lawyer. If you want me to be that lawyer, my information is listed below. And we're always open to show topic suggestions. We want to be responsive to what our viewers want to hear about. So if you have something, leave a comment in the comment section or send an email to the email address listed below. And as I said at the beginning, if you find our content at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, following us on social media, and sharing our videos with your friends.